Two people. Same age, same generation, same country. One of them, at 75, is still sharp, still curious, still reads books, remembers names, tells stories with all the details intact. The other, at 75, is losing the thread. Words go missing. Conversations are harder to follow. Names of people they have known for decades take a moment too long to arrive. Same age. Different minds. For decades, medicine assumed the difference came down to genetics, to luck, to factors outside anyone's control. The research now says something different. A growing body of evidence from studies involving thousands of adults in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, published in journals including Nature Aging, JAMA Network Open, and Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience, points to one of the most unexpected predictors of cognitive sharpness in later life. Not your genes, not your education, not even your lifestyle choices in their most obvious forms. The bacteria living in your gut right now. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how those bacteria determine cognitive sharpness, which ones are disappearing after 60, and the specific foods that have been shown to bring them back. But first, I want to show you something about people who live to 100 with their minds intact. Because their guts are telling us something extraordinary. In 2023, a study published in Nature Aging analyzed the gut microbiomes of 1,575 people ranging in age from 20 to 117 years. It included 297 centenarians. The researchers were not looking for a single magic bacterium. They were looking for patterns. And what they found across that extraordinary range of ages was striking. Centenarians, people who had lived past 100, many of them with their cognitive faculties largely intact, had gut microbiomes that looked decades younger than their actual age. More diverse, more balanced. Enriched with beneficial bacterial species. Depleted of the pro-inflammatory bacteria that dominate the guts of less healthy older adults. Their gut bacteria had aged far more slowly than their bodies. Meanwhile, research comparing the microbiomes of centenarians to those of younger individuals found that the bacteria most strongly associated with longevity and cognitive resilience were ones that produce anti-inflammatory compounds, maintain gut wall integrity, and regulate the immune system. Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, one of the most important anti-inflammatory bacteria in the human gut, was significantly depleted in individuals with higher inflammatory burdens and poorer health outcomes. Akkermansia muciniphila, a species now considered a marker of gut health and metabolic resilience, was strongly present in centenarians with preserved function. And a separate analysis of 1,156 fecal samples found that specific bacterial species linked to longevity, including Lactobacillus fermentum, were found at significantly higher levels in the longest-lived, healthiest individuals. The question the centenarian research asks is not, what did these people do to live so long? It is, what is their gut doing that most people's guts stopped doing in their 60s? Let me explain what is specifically happening inside the gut as you age, because the pattern is precise enough to be useful. A 2024 systematic review published in Nutrients, covering studies on gut microbiota composition and cognitive functioning in healthy older adults, identified the core shift that occurs with age. Two groups of protective bacteria decline consistently: Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus. These are the species that, in a younger, healthier gut, perform several functions that are directly relevant to brain health. They produce short-chain fatty acids, including acetate and butyrate. They regulate the gut lining's integrity. They suppress the growth of pro-inflammatory species. And research has shown that Bifidobacterium in particular produces compounds that enhance brain-derived neurotrophic factor BDNF, a protein that functions as fertilizer for neurons. It promotes the growth and survival of brain cells and is essential for the memory consolidation process that takes place in the hippocampus. At the same time, pro-inflammatory bacterial families, particularly Enterobacteriaceae, increase. These produce lipopolysaccharide, a compound that triggers immune activation, crosses into the bloodstream when the gut lining is compromised, reaches the brain, and activates the same inflammatory cascade we have traced across every video in this series. Less Bifidobacterium, less Lactobacillus, less butyrate, less BDNF, less hippocampal support, more Enterobacteriaceae, more lipopolysaccharide, more neuroinflammation, more hippocampal impairment. That is the gut microbiome aging profile, translated directly into what it means for the brain. Now I want to show you something even more specific, because this is where the research moves from association to something more concrete. A study published in JAMA Network Open in 2022, part of the coronary artery risk development in young adults cohort, examined the association between gut microbiota and cognitive function across multiple cognitive domains. The researchers found that gut microbial community composition, the diversity and balance of bacteria, was statistically significantly associated with all measures of cognitive function tested. A separate study from the University of Queensland, examining 69 healthy adults aged 60 to 75, identified specific bacterial families that predicted performance on distinct cognitive tests. The family Carnobacteriaceae explained 9% of the variance in quality of episodic secondary memory, the kind of memory used to recall conversations, events, and sequences. Two other bacterial families explained 15% of the variance in working memory performance. 15% of the variance in working memory predicted by which families of bacteria were present in the gut. These are not dramatic numbers. But in a field where we struggle to predict cognitive outcomes at all, they are meaningful. They suggest that the bacterial community in your gut is not merely correlated with brain function, it is actively participating in it. And then there is the Stanford 2026 Nature study that anchored this entire series. The one that traced the precise chain from aging gut bacteria through immune cells, through the vagus nerve, to the hippocampus itself. The one that showed in aging mice that restoring the gut-brain communication signal reversed cognitive decline. The bacteria in your gut are not passive passengers. They are co-pilots. I want to tell you about a man I will call Henry. Henry is 74. He had been a high school history teacher for 31 years. His sharpness, his recall, his ability to hold a room with a story, these were his identity. Around 70, he noticed the edges softening, not dramatically, not clinically, but he knew. He was slower to retrieve names he should have had immediately. He would lose the arc of a story mid-telling and have to reach for it. Henry's doctor found nothing alarming. Normal aging, he was told. Henry started reading about the gut-brain axis. He started making 4 specific changes to his diet, not a complete overhaul. 4 targeted changes. After 3 months, Henry wrote to us. He said, "I do not know how to measure what changed. But I am back in the room. The names are there when I reach for them. I cannot promise you Henry's experience. Every person is different. These are dietary changes, not medical treatments. Please always speak with your doctor before changing your health routine." What Henry did, and what the research consistently points to, comes down to 4 things. Action number 1. Daily fermented foods to directly rebuild Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus populations. The Stanford 2021 clinical trial published in Cell, which we covered in video 1, found that daily fermented food consumption for 10 weeks significantly increased microbial diversity and reduced inflammatory markers. The specific bacteria restored were predominantly from the Lactobacillus family. A 2025 systematic review in Frontiers in Nutrition, examining the effects of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium in fermented foods on cognitive health, found that these strains in food form were associated with beneficial effects on cognitive function markers in aging adults. Plain yogurt with live active cultures. Kefir. Unpasteurized sauerkraut. Kimchi. These are the most direct dietary delivery system for the bacteria whose decline is most consistently associated with aging cognitive performance. The practical target: 1 serving daily. The same half cup of kefir or 2 tablespoons of sauerkraut we discussed in video 1. Consistency matters more than quantity. Action number 2. Prebiotic fiber to feed and sustain those bacteria. Probiotics are the soldiers. Prebiotics are what keeps them alive and multiplying. The bacteria we are trying to rebuild: Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus, Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, all ferment dietary fiber as their primary fuel source. The short-chain fatty acids they produce in that process, particularly butyrate and acetate, are what supports the gut lining, suppresses neuroinflammation, and, in the case of Bifidobacterium-derived acetate, promotes microglial health in the brain. Research has consistently found that higher dietary fiber intake is associated with greater microbial diversity, lower inflammatory markers, and better cognitive outcomes in older adults. The most effective prebiotic fiber sources for these specific bacteria are oats, barley, and legumes for their beta-glucan and fermentable fiber content. Jerusalem artichokes, garlic, and onions for their inulin, and cooked then cooled potatoes for resistant starch cooking, and then cooling a potato converts a portion of its starch into resistant starch that your gut bacteria can ferment directly, bypassing digestion in the small intestine and arriving intact in the colon where it is needed. The practical target: 25 to 30 grams of total dietary fiber daily. Most adults over 60 consume fewer than 15. The gap is large, and the impact of closing it in the research is consistently significant. Action number 3. Polyphenol-rich foods to suppress the pro-inflammatory bacteria that are replacing the ones you are trying to rebuild. The gut microbiome is not just about what you add, it is about what you suppress. Polyphenols found in dark berries, cocoa, coffee, green tea, and extra virgin olive oil are not well absorbed by the human small intestine. Most of them arrive in the colon essentially intact. And there, they selectively inhibit the growth of pro-inflammatory bacterial species while promoting the growth of Bifidobacterium and Akkermansia muciniphila. A 2024 prospective study tracking dietary patterns and cognitive outcomes over 12 years found that metabolites derived from cocoa, coffee, mushrooms, and polyphenol-rich plant foods were among the most consistently associated with protection against cognitive decline. Specifically, metabolites produced when gut bacteria process these polyphenols were predictive of better cognitive outcomes, meaning the benefit came not just from the food, but from what the gut bacteria did with it. The practical target: a daily combination of dark berries, a cup of green tea or coffee, and 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. These 3 inputs together create a polyphenol environment that actively reshapes which bacteria thrive. Action number 4. Reduce the foods that feed the wrong bacteria. This is the most under-discussed part of the gut microbiome conversation, and it is the one with possibly the most immediate impact. Ultra-processed foods, packaged snacks, fast food, refined grains, added sugars. Artificial emulsifiers consistently promote the growth of Enterobacteriaceae, the pro-inflammatory bacterial family whose increase is most strongly associated with the aging gut-brain profile. They also directly damage the gut lining, reduce microbial diversity, and lower the production of the short-chain fatty acids that protect brain function. A 2025 review in Molecular Nutrition and Food Research found that diets high in ultra-processed foods drive dysbiosis and the inflammatory cascades that damage the gut-brain axis across multiple studies. You do not need to eliminate everything. but the ratio matters. More fermented foods, more fiber, more polyphenols. Less processed food. That ratio is what the centenarian research consistently shows in the guts of people who stayed sharp. Let me bring this back to the two people I described at the beginning. Same age, different minds. The research does not say their difference was destiny. It says it was, at least in part, the accumulated result of what was happening in their guts across the decades that preceded 70. One gut maintained its Bifidobacterium, its Faecalibacterium, its Akkermansia. It fed those bacteria with fiber and polyphenols. It kept the gut lining intact. It kept the lipopolysaccharide out of the bloodstream. It kept the vagus nerve signal clear. It kept the hippocampus well supplied with BDNF. The other gut, quietly, without any noticeable symptoms, drifted. Diversity dropped. Enterobacteriaceae expanded. The fire started. The signal weakened. This entire series has been tracing that drift and naming its mechanisms. The gut bacteria, the vagus nerve, the zombie cells, the inflammaging fire, all of them connect. All of them are addressable through the same dietary interventions. The two people at 75 made different choices long before 75. Not necessarily dramatic choices. Small, consistent ones. About what they ate. About what they fed their bacteria. You are making those choices right now. Here is what I want you to carry out of this video. The sharpness you have at 70, at 75, at 80 is not entirely fixed. It is not purely genetic. It is not simply the passage of time. It is, in meaningful part, a product of what is living in your gut, of what those organisms are producing, of whether your gut wall is intact enough to keep their inflammatory byproducts out of your blood and your brain. And that ecosystem responds to what you feed it, every day. You are not waiting for a clinical trial. You are not waiting for a prescription. You are not waiting for a specialist to tell you it is time to take this seriously. The centenarians who stayed sharp at 100 were not doing something extraordinary. They were doing something consistent. Something ordinary, repeated daily, over decades. And the research tells you exactly what that was. So here is your one action for today. Add one prebiotic food to your next meal. A handful of oats at breakfast. A can of white beans with dinner. A sliced banana with your afternoon snack. One prebiotic food. One step toward feeding the bacteria that are working to keep your mind clear. The bacteria in your gut are making decisions about your brain right now. It is time to start making decisions about your bacteria. Quick recap. A Nature Aging study of 1,575 people, including 297 centenarians, found that the longest-lived, healthiest individuals maintained gut microbiomes that looked decades younger than their actual age. Higher diversity, enriched beneficial bacteria, depleted pro-inflammatory pathobionts. The cognitive shift in aging is associated with a consistent pattern: declining Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus, rising Enterobacteriaceae, reduced BDNF production, increased neuroinflammation via lipopolysaccharide. 4 dietary actions with the strongest research support: daily fermented foods to directly rebuild the bacteria whose decline predicts cognitive decline. Prebiotic fiber oats, legumes, garlic, cooked then cooled potatoes to fuel those bacteria and drive butyrate and acetate production. Polyphenol-rich foods: dark berries, green tea, olive oil to suppress pro-inflammatory bacteria and feed protective ones, and reducing ultra-processed foods that consistently disrupt the microbial balance you are trying to maintain. Next video, we are turning to the cellular engine behind everything this series has covered. The gut bacteria, the vagus nerve, the zombie cells, the inflammaging fire, all of them are amplified by what happens to one specific structure inside your cells after 60. Your mitochondria. When they decline, and they do decline, reliably, after 60, they amplify every other aging mechanism in this series. They produce less energy. They generate more oxidative stress. They release signals that activate the same inflammatory pathways we have been discussing for 6 videos. But the foods that restore them are not the ones most people would guess. And the mechanism is far more interesting than what your biology teacher described. That video is next. Subscribe button is just below. And if someone in your life has been told that their mind slowing down is just aging, please share this series. The bacteria in their gut have something to say about that. Always speak with your doctor before making changes to your diet or health routine. Everything here is for educational purposes only. Take care of yourself. And I will see you in the next one.